Hello, and welcome to Japan
Hey,
Expert
how you guys doing?
Insights. You're probably wondering what happens with the third person.
We're getting
You usually have somebody
here. I'm hearing
right in the
myself
middle here
talk, which
that we're
I mean,
talking to.
I'm always
Not
hearing
this-
myself talk, but
Oh
I'm
no!
hearing myself talk as an echo.
Right. Yes.
I don't know what happened there. I talk
What
too
happened?
much is what's happening, and now I'm hearing myself talk. So, hi everybody. We got
Hey, how's it
Daniel
going,
Smith
Mike? How's it
in
going,
the
Mike?
show today, and we're going to introduce you in a second. This is the 2-3 minutes that we just kind of shoot the breeze and let everybody log in. And this is going to be a great episode. It's a case where I'm like, Daniels gets to be interviewed, and we were just talking before the show. I recently had the experience of being interviewed, and when you're used to being on this side of the fence, it's always a unique experience to be on the other side. But it's going to be a fantastic show.
I don't know why I'm always nervous on this side of it and very comfortable.
I
on the
know,
other
right?
side.
Why? It's so easy. It should be less work, you know. We just gotta like tennis. We're just hitting it. But so a reminder for all of our friends here in Chicago. Next Saturday on July 19th is going to be the Japan Festival. It's going to be in Skokie at a place called, I believe it's like Sports Park, something like that in Skokie. It's a big, wide, open field that's going to have a ton of vendors. Anything that's Japanese in Chicago is going to be there. So it's highly recommended. If you're going to be in the Chicago area, it's going to be all day, but definitely look it up, the Japan Festival 2025. Every Japanese organization gets involved, and I'm going to be volunteering. So I'll be running around. I have no idea what they're going to have me do. If they're smart, they'll put me as far away as possible cleaning up garbage. That's probably the best place. Otherwise, I'll just distract everybody.
Well, I'm from St. Louis, but I have relatives in Chicago. So,
well, tell them to look me up. We'll set them up, and we'll give them a little extra matcha or something. I don't know. Okay. We'll figure it out. But but that's happening. And I don't know if you've been catching. It was really interesting to see Brad Pitt running around Japan for the Formula One movie press junket. I think he did everything. I think he broke a sake barrel.
He was all over, man. I mean, he went. To be honest, I think he kind of followed in the steps of Tom Cruise, because Tom Cruise was here about 3 weeks earlier and pretty much did the same thing. They ran into each other in London. So I guess he told him, say, look, you go to Tokyo, you better do all these things. So it was pretty interesting, though. He was everywhere. He was right a few minutes from at the Tokyo Tower and a couple other places. So, and the F1 movie is going very well here, around the world.
The F1 movie's done really, really well everywhere, which I think can surprise people a little bit, but I don't know. Well, Maya and I, by the way, hi, Maya, over there in Tokyo, and Daniel's in Tokyo as well. Good morning.
Hey,
good
morning.
But it's like, because you have all these, older guy movies, dad movies, they call them here in the States. And F1 was something you could take the kids to. I saw a lot of people, a lot of families, and a lot of them were wearing racing gear, checking out F1, because it stays kind of on that, PG-13, it's very watchable, in terms of content.
Well, I'm ecstatic about it because we produced a F1 movie on a teenage driver here in Japan. We just basically finished it, did the Hollywood premiere late last year, called Juju Racing Against Destiny. She's an 19-year-old now. What they call a super formula driver in here, but she's the real deal. So
yeah.
Well, welcome. So, by the way, now's the time to introduce you. It's Daniel Smith. He's in the house today. And he really has one hell of a background, and we're going to get into that a little bit. He's a producer. He runs entertainment programs. What's the big? It says Aurora Borealis, but you're also Backstage Pass too, right?
Backstage Pass is one of our programs. Yeah, Backstage Pass is one of our programs. So we produce a number of programs, and Backstage Pass is we call it the Celebrity Insider program because it's pretty much just generates around celebrities, either coming to promote movies, doing interviews, weird things about celebrities. So it's kind of like, it was patterned after E. We did a lot of stuff for E! News. And so I've always kind of been interested in that format, as a fan. And to be able to go out and actually interview a lot of these stars is just, kind of one of the big deals that I've always enjoyed.
So that's an now you had a very interesting path to this because you were Air Force, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I spent 21 years in the Air Force.
Right. And so obviously you were probably stationed in Japan. And my guess is you're not Japanese. And so tell me a little bit about like how did you transition from the Air Force to being in the entertainment?
Well, it's really weird because I worked in public affairs in the Air Force in my later years, which is basically you're the PR arm of the military. And in that capacity, I would work with a lot of news organizations and sometimes with movie companies who would want to film on various military bases. So, and again, I was always interested. I've always been a movie fan. You know, if I had nothing to do in life but to watch movies, I'd be completely happy. And so when I got out, I was approached because I also did a lot of part-time journalism for people like Associated Press and some of the areas where states that I lived in, I would work as a part-time reporter at the local newspaper. So when I retired, AP in Tokyo offered me a job and they said, hey, look, we love you to come in as a writer, a reporter, and be our military correspondent. And I told them, what part of I just spent 21 years in the military that you guys not here, you know? And not that I had anything against that. It's just that, 21 years of being in the military, there was nothing. They would give me this like, oh man, you can make a nice career for yourself as that. And so I kind of nipped that one in the bud. And the only thing they had to offer was a job covering entertainment. So at the time, Eric Talmadge, who was the reporter who recruited me, I asked myself, well, what does the entertainment person do? And he says, you got to go, because he was a hardcore news guy at the time. He says, you got to go out and cover celebrities and go to premieres and red carpets and parties and stuff like that. And I said, like, okay, put me in that line.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds like I
thought put me in that line. I never got out of that line. So, yeah.
Nice.
So here I am.
So you already had a natural interest in it, and then the door just opened and you were able to walk right in.
Yeah.
And when was that?
If I remember, I think my first interview with Nicolas Cage, and I was just stunned. I was just stunned because they actually picked me up in a car and to go and it was Nicolas Cage in a car. And I'm just like, I can't believe this, And it's been pretty amazing ever since. And then at some point, I decided that I wanted to start producing programs. And again, I didn't have any experience with this. I didn't go to school for this or anything. I just had a curiosity, and I thought, "What the hell? I mean, what's the worst that could happen?" Yeah.
So when did you interview Nicolas Cage? Because you were 21 years in the military, but you've been doing this for an awful long time too, if I'm not mistaken.
That was in early 2000. I think he was here promoting the movie, and. And the PR agency said, look, they're going to pick you up. So I thought it was somebody, because I was doing it for AP. So I thought it was somebody in the car and stuff like that. And it was him in the car, And so with a driver, of course. And so I think we went to Roppongi and yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, how was it? Obviously you had some experience doing this because you worked in, in and around.
Well, in the military, I used to work on military newspapers, so we had a lot of experience. I had to this day, a lot of my friends that were in the military or outside the military now doing similar type jobs, either in public relations or as journalists. And so it wasn't a big stretch to go from there to the other, because unlike people would think like, well, you've been in the military as propaganda. No, they were pretty independent, the newspapers. So I had the interview skills I developed from the military.
And who were those besides Nicolas Cage? I mean, you've talked to everybody. I mean, I was going to say, who have been some of these highlights over the years? I know Michael Jackson was somebody you did that.
Yeah.
That was an interesting story.
Yeah. Michael Jackson was it was like 11 days. I covered him in his final tour overseas, actually. And that was pretty interesting because I got invited to do that, and the promoter who was promoting it said, "Look, Michael is going to call you, and and talk to you about this. And I was like, yeah, right. So I get a call. And the voice is kind of deep and said, "Hi, you, Mr. Smith." Yeah, he says, I'm Michael Jackson. And I'm like, yeah, BS. Somebody's just. Well, can I tell you? Of course, you go out and you tell several people like, "Oh, I'm going to cover Michael Jackson." So I hung up on it, and I get a call back at about 3 or 4 minutes later in the Michael Jackson voice, and it's like, well, that was one of the rudest things, and I was just, oh my God, I'm sorry, and I thought somebody was playing a joke on me. So, but that was pretty interesting. I got to follow him around for 11 days. They had me stay at the same hotel that they were staying. It was just, I saw a completely different side of him that the public probably saw. That he was funny. He loved telling jokes, loved drinking gin and eating Kentucky Fried Chicken. So it was pretty interesting.
Yeah. And so besides Michael Jackson, which obviously was a big deal. And that kind of propels you because like I said, in those days, you've talked to everybody. I was going to say, who else stood out? I mean, Michael Jackson, obviously, he's Michael Jackson, but
oh man, I see Will Smith,
I know it's the Rolodex.
George Clooney, Rihanna, Keanu Reeves. Man, there's so many. I'm Bruce Willis at the time, Clint Eastwood, J-Lo, Charlize Theron. It's a lot. I think at the last con, I have a folder I keep pictures of, and I mean at the last con was like 250 people, so it's a lot. Yeah.
Does it start to blur together after a while, just because you just talk to so many people?
Yeah. I don't know, but I'm a fan, so I've always approached this a little bit different. I've always been a fan of film and music, so to be able to, I think back, like people that are no longer here, like Ray Charles, James Brown, legends, in the time. Yeah. It's all these type of people, and then. So for me, it's always exciting because I'm generally a big fan, and then of course I can't show that when I'm in the interview. I got to be a little bit professional, but sometimes I geek out and just tell them like, "Oh my God, I'm a huge fan."
No, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, but was it a learning curve going from sort of like more military publications?
Yeah, I think so because I didn't expect them to be as personable or as some of them turned out. Like Will Smith just tells me, "Hey, again over the phone, I want to meet you, take you out to breakfast." And I'm like, "Wow, Will Smith, Mr. Independence guy, wants to take me out to breakfast," And George Clooney was nice. He did some stuff. Brad Pitt took some pictures. One of the things that I like to do here in Japan is when celebrities come over, I try to talk them into visiting military bases and military families. And for the most part, most of them do.
Wow.
Denzel Washington, like I said, George Clooney, a lot of stars take the time to spend some time with military here, which is important to me because, again, I spent 21 years in the military, and they don't always get, the A-list entertainers.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about that is I think in some ways you have this sort of access to celebrities, and by being able to bring them to the military bases, you're getting to see these different sides of them. Do you find that because they're in Japan, like already they're maybe in a different headspace than they would be if, let's say, you were doing this in LA?
Oh, it's a big difference. You were talking about, how did I get into this business? Well, I did it the traditional. I tried to do it the traditional way. When I retired, I took a bunch of my savings, went to LA, and said, "Okay, I'm going to make my start here in LA." I was there in 3 weeks. Lost all my money in the first week. stayed at the USO for a couple of weeks in the airport they split me up and chewed me out when I was in LA. And when I got to Tokyo, it's really different because they come here and they don't run into foreigners that much. They basically assign translators, which a lot of them hate. I mean, they like communicating, but they're used to talking directly to fans, and here you got to talk to translators. So when they would run into me and I was speaking English, they loved it. And then what happens is these stars come to couple of times a year. And again, I've been here 25 years now. So,
Mm.
you know, many people, you know, like you talk about Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or Will Smith or, you know, people like that. You know, I'm on like my 15th or 16th time talking to them, you know.
Right.
And so it's a commonality now that we kind of know each other, you know. So it's very,
Right.
you know, we have conversations now where we used to just talk about what's going on, and now we talk about, you know, away from the camera, the different things. So.
Yeah,
Now-
I have a question to you, Michael. Sorry, because I listened to you and you chose to do business in Japan. And I have a question. I gather from what you're telling us now that for a moment you found, or maybe in the beginning, you found your niche in Japan. And in a sense, it probably was easier to start a business here in Japan than in the United States. Am I picking it correctly, or am I wrong about
It was
this?
easier for me to get access to stars like these in Japan, completely
Mhm.
different than when I was in LA. I mean, I'd probably still be trying, you know, it was just, it's just that there's so many competitive people in LA that are so good that I was good, but it was just, I walk out and there was a sea of other people just as good or better than me. So that was the thing that kind of forced me to kind of realize where I was and try to do something different. Yeah.
Did you find
And again,
that
I hadn't settled on entertainment, but that was just something I wanted to do. So I wanted to give a shot before I had to take another job if that didn't work out.
Right. Did you find you were accepted by the Japanese readily at first, or was there a learning curve there too?
I was helped a little. I was helped a little bit here. At the time, I'm watching Japanese TV, and I see. Speaking of Chicago, I see another American that was on TV. It was a guy named Dave Spector.
And, he's still there.
He's actually good friends now. We're best friends now. But when I saw he was from Chicago, I thought, okay, I'm going to put the St. Louis Chicago thing. I called him up. He invited me out for dinner. You know, in fact, we went to this restaurant that required a coat. And I didn't have a sports jacket at the time. I mean, I was really running low on funds. And so he loaned me a jacket. We sat down. And he told me a couple of things. He said, well, what do you want to do? You want to be an on-air talent or producer? I said, no, I prefer to be behind the cameras and talent. He says, well, I wouldn't speak much Japanese if I was you, or I wouldn't let them know I speak Japanese as much. You know, because I was actually in taking Japanese courses at the time. And I said, well, why is that? He said, because they're going to always treat you as a talent. In Japan, it's different from America. You know, the talent works for the agencies, where in America, you know, your managers or agencies work for you. And it was a very pretty stark transition, but I took his advice because he was Dave Spector. And so initially, I think my first couple of meetings I went into places, because I was living in Yokohama at the time. So I went to TV studios, you know, I dressed up in a suit, got a translator, went there, pretty much got thrown out, you know. But what happened was, I guess the two biggest things that happened to me was, first, obviously, was Michael Jackson, because I was freelancing on my own when the Michael Jackson opportunity came up, and every network in Japan wanted the footage. And I convinced Michael Jackson and everybody else to say, hey, okay. And it was really, you know, when I think about it, it was kind of a crazy move, because I went in there and I kind of sat down, and since I told him, I said, I don't want you to pay me. I don't want to work for you. I don't want to work for your guys. I said, but I want to be able to shoot all the footage, and I want my team to shoot all the footage. And I don't want you to allow anybody else to shoot footage. We'll give it to them, or we'll sell them the footage. And at the time, I had no idea whether that was going to work or not, but I knew how popular he was, and it just went crazy. I think me and my staff, Mika Akawa at the time, and Riho, who's now in Canada, we were up all night taking orders from TV stations on the footage, and we were looking at the news in America. It was running on ABC, NBC, everything, and it just blew my mind. You know, just the impact of what media can do, and he had later credited his team had credited, said, "Hey, this helped us make a comeback," because Michael Jackson was going through some pretty serious things at the time. He had just came out of a trial, he was lost a lot of there was a lot of controversies around him, but this showed him in a different light, because one of the things that I insisted on was that, hey, you got to talk. I know you don't talk much in public, but in Japan, nobody's going to buy you, and I just want you to talk. I said, so if you just yourself, because I met him to talk with him, I thought this is the side of you that people need to see, not this, this exclusive side. And I got to give him credit. He didn't restrict me in any way. So the long answer to your short question is that it did it was different, and it was a huge opportunity that Japan offered me that I think that was unique about working here in Japan.
Nice. And we got some messages. I know Deborah D. Snoot says that you have some very interesting stories, so we might have to get a few more from you there. And Remy says, wow, Dan. And we have somebody from New York who says they're really looking forward to this episode. So thank you guys for chiming in. It's always good. So if you got any messages or questions for Dan, feel free to put them in the comments, or if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching on LinkedIn. We're here. We'll do the best we can to field them for you. So Daniel, you worked for like Fox, I think, for a bit. You worked for
So
you worked for different organizations before you went on your own.
Yeah. So I was with ACTV, a local Japanese company that we formed a partnership. And the Michael Jackson thing, I think, blew Fox away. I mean, literally, the CEO at the time, Ward Platt, and June Lee, who was the assistant, we used to play basketball together at a military facility in Tokyo, and we didn't know what backgrounds we were each talking. And so we played, and we took a break, and we were sitting down, and the guys, they were Ward and June were talking about, man, it's just, we should be getting more access to stars and blah 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 and stuff like that. And then I think June asked me, says, what do you do? I says, I kind of do some stuff at AP, I do some stuff like that. And they said, what kind of celebrity stuff? I said, well, actually, I'm about to do something with Michael Jackson and stuff like that. And the guy says, well, what company are you with? I said, I'm not with any company. They said, what do you mean you're not with any company? I said, no, I'm just doing this on my own. And I showed them, I remember I showed them a couple of pictures, and they like, why don't you come and work for Fox? And I said, Fox? Yeah, I'd love to come and work at Fox. And so, but I said, there's a problem, because I had about 5 or 6 people working with me together with the ACTV. And I said, you would have to hire all of them. And the Fox guy said, no, we can't hire all of them. We'll hire you. And they offered me a salary that just blew my mind. I looked at that like, oh my God, and it wasn't that I didn't want that kind of money, but I felt that, I kind of, maybe it's just a part of me that, being 21 years in the military, where you have a team, you kind of stick with the team. So I told him, I said, look, I love this. I've never had an offer like this, and it's the job I want to do, but I need you to hire the rest of my team, And they said, well, we're not going to do it. So we kind of just continue to play basketball. And every 3 or 4 weeks, they come back and say, well, we'll take you and one other. And I said, no. And they said, well, we'll take you and 2 others. And this just stretched out almost a year and a half. Wow. Until they finally agreed to take everybody, and even my staff at the time says you're crazy, but I was just like, I've always been kind of a loyal guy, and I just, I mean, the money was ridiculous, but I wasn't going to take it unless they took everybody. So they took everybody, and I was at Fox for 10 years, enjoyed it, and then decided that it was time to start my own company again.
That's such a smart move, though. I mean, you get it, because if once you go to another team, you don't know, that adds a whole other, level, of variables that,
Yeah, and I've seen it. These guys, like I said, they did the Michael Jackson thing, and we, when we saw what we did with Michael Jackson, I thought, hey, this team can do anything at any level, and so yeah, it was they, and I just, again, I tend to be a little bit loyal, and it's worked for me, so I'm not going to go against it now,
Right. Well, sorry. No, I wanted to say.
I talk enough. You take it, man.
Yeah. No. I wanted to say thank you for telling us that story, because loyalty goes both ways, right? It's not just let's say your team being loyal to you as a team leader, but also you being loyal to them as well. And
Exactly.
when right, and it is so very important, and I'm very happy that you told us that story, because very few people actually realize that this is a two-way street. So thanks a lot for this.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I do credit my military career because they taught me that, and so I just even to this day, some people tell me like, I can't believe you held out that long. I says, look, they kept asking, so I thought, maybe it's in my favor, if they would have stopped asking, then I would have said, okay, but maybe that didn't work,
Right.
Now, you've obviously interviewed plenty of American celebrities, but you've also interviewed Japanese celebrities as well.
Yeah.
So, is there a difference when interviewing the American celebrities versus the Japanese celebrities?
Oh, it's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. It's first of all the major Japanese celebrities work for their agency. It's very few of them that's independent enough. And while they don't, with me, it's a little bit different because they know I'm different. They know I'm accepted in Japan, so they have a lot more leeway when they talk to me as they would than they would probably with some other journalist or TV producer. But I find that that's starting to change now. As you know, they've had a lot of controversy here in Japan with agencies and problems with agencies. I think they're starting to loosen up a bit. But yes, it's a pretty big difference, though. Even now, it's still a big difference. But when you talk to a Japanese star as opposed to talking to Hollywood international stars.
Do you find that the Japanese stars like to talk to you because you're sort of outside of the system?
We're flooded with requests from Japanese stars, and we work with a lot of Japanese stars. We just finished a film, Mysterious Pond, by my partner Goodness, who just produced that. We had Kato Masaya, Natsuki, Kunamoto, Sho, Ishima. We had a lot of Japanese talent in that, and we have a couple of movie projects because we're starting to transition into movies, and I'm looking forward to actually showing Japanese stars to the rest of the world, because as Mario will tell you, we see so much here in Japan and that we're excited about. But again, Japan as a system has a hard time bringing that over, other than anime, which is extremely popular. But the rest of it is just starting now to be felt outside of Japan, with the success of Shogun and stuff like that.
Right. Do you feel like, how quickly is it changing? Are you seeing like in the next year or two? Is this going to be still another 10
I'm
years?
saying the next 3 to 5 years. It just, nothing happens quickly in Japan.
Of course not. No. It's fine. I mean, there's a level of stability
and
that Americans just dream about.
I think patience is a key. Wait, I'm getting called by Good. Let me tell them I'm on air. Hey, sorry, I'm on air. Okay. Yeah. So,
welcome. We'll bring him on the show. We'll talk to him.
He was the guy who just, like I was just telling you, who just produced the Mysterious Pond movie. But no, it's just Japan. Because I do a lot of visiting around prefectures, because pretty much every prefecture in Japan wants to get more Hollywood business. They want to get more films and stuff like that. But you go film in Australia, Canada, places all over the US, and there's financial incentives. There's all kind of attractions and agencies that will work with you to make it more to increase the chances of the film being done here. Well, in Japan, these agencies don't work together like they do in these other countries of the US. So where I'll go to a tourism office and talk to them, and they say, "Oh, well, this is great. We want to do more of this, but you need to go talk to the TV office." And then the TV office says, "Oh, this is great, but to get funding, you need to go talk to this office." And by that time, most of especially Hollywood producers, they're done. They don't have that kind of patience. So patience is something that you really need. And there's a lot of key people here in Japan. I'm not the only one. There's several people that work in this industry that are working to change that. And I'm seeing success, but my prediction is still that it's still going to be 3 to 5 years before you see it on the level of some of these other countries. where productions are being shot in Japan.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that it will also involve some changes in the legislation, because
Exactly.
yes, it's not only that the agencies do not work together, but there are also some restrictions in terms of legal terms. So I think that, yeah, and changing the legislation actually takes long time too.
Yeah, that's one thing I tell people all the time. You know, you can go in America, you can shut down the street in front of the White House and film a movie.
Yeah.
You go to my neighborhood right outside, and it takes, all kind of paperwork and stuff just to shoot for 2 seconds on a corner here. It's impossible, And so that kind of, and with these type of budgets, you just can't have that kind of delay in cost. So but again, like I said, there are changes. There was a bit of a John Wick 4 that was shot up in Osaka. Shogun, which everybody thinks is shot in Japan, isn't. It's actually shot in Canada. But yeah, they're starting. Toma Studios is starting to do more. So they're working on it. And then you have Netflix and Amazon here that are doing more. So it's changing.
Yeah, I've heard this a lot about like people just having a tough time shooting, just trying to get that paperwork. We're always debating. We just open up a business that just does the paperwork, and it would be amazing. Is it all throughout Japan, or is it just the major areas? Or like, for example,
it's all throughout Japan. It's all throughout Japan. Okinawa is getting a little bit better, but yeah, it's all throughout. But it's changing.
Yeah, no, in America, because obviously there's certain regions that become more film friendly. I know like Chicago, part of when the whole Dark Knight Rises, Dark Knight, not Rises was shot in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But the Dark Knight was shot in Chicago, and there was a lot of films being shot in Chicago because there was this whole initiative to be very film friendly. And I didn't know if like Japan had certain regions that were trying to be more film friendly.
Yeah. They want it. They want it. And you hear the talk all the time, and I get it all the time, but again, it's just hard to put these agencies together because the way Japan government works is still, and I actually look into it all the time, but it's still very secretive and it's just difficult. It's just very difficult to do.
Well, it's like when you think of Bullet Train, that was all green screen because they couldn't probably shoot anywhere. Yeah. Maya, you were asking.
No, I was going to ask again. Do you think that as demand increases, demand for shooting in different areas of Japan, as demand increases, do you think that they will actually make some steps towards easing those restrictions?
Yeah, well, there's an organization called VIPO, which is doing a lot of good work to try to change that. It's a government organization. It's the first one that I think is really trying to put together a serious approach to increase films being shot, international films and TV shows being shot in Japan. So, like I said, it's changing. It's just that it's changing so slowly. For us who live in Japan, that's actually fast. But I'm looking at it, the gauge from outside of Japan, and I have pretty good producer friends, who tell me all the time, I would love to shoot, but, and it always comes with a but,
Yeah.
Now, you can also have some expertise in this too, Daniel, because besides just being the man people would go to do interviews, you're also making entertainment in Japan.
Yeah, I do more of that than I do the interviews. The interviews kind of take a highlight because the stars are so big, but yeah, we produce maybe I'd say I think I've done maybe 30 programs. I've had on Fox, Amazon, NBC Universal, Hulu, and most of my stuff up to now have been like documentaries and entertainment style programs. So. I would say that, yeah, and then there's been a couple of reality programs that I produce, So,
have you been moving into more narrative kind of like programs?
Yeah,
or?
yeah. Now we're starting to move into dramas. There's a couple of scripts I'm writing now, and then, like I said, we just did our Juju film was more like a docu-movie, which they call them now. Then this Mysterious Pond is just a cultural movie out of Japan. Very beautiful cinematography about Japan, and it's just really nice. And then we're looking at doing a couple of action dramas.
Oh, here in Japan, shooting them here.
Yeah. Everything that I'm doing in Japan. I'm dedicated to trying to get more done in Japan. There's plenty of people in Hollywood and the rest of the world, but I want to be among the cadre of people here that make stuff happen. Deborah, one of the people who is on your list there, she's another one. Daryl, because there's a lot of people who are working together now to try to produce dramas and movies here with an international feel. Because the thing is, it's got to be able to cross over. Shogun is very popular because it was easy to cross over.
Yes. Yeah.
So how long did it take you to transition to producing entertainment and then eventually these sort of narrative-driven programs? How was that process? Was it easier because you had already kind of had ins with the business?
Well, it was, again, I think it was my lack of experience that actually helped me, because I didn't know what you couldn't do. So I just did it. I remember shortly after I got here, I started producing programs because I didn't realize that you couldn't, I didn't, all the restrictions that you would normally think about. I think TV Kanagawa, I was doing a program for them. It's calm. I did something for them. And then I had there was a distributor we have in the US, Mike Markwell. He was getting my program. I had a program I produced called Black Life in Japan, which I was doing some work for BET. Basically, I was covering, entertainers, for BET, and I had all this extra footage. And so, as a joke, I made up a program, and I showed it to a couple people. They says, "What would you call it?" And I couldn't think of anything. And this guy says, "You should call it Black Life in Japan." I thought that's the craziest thing I ever heard of. But what happened was, I went to NAPTI, which is a industry seminar that was held in Las Vegas. It was the first time I went there, and I ended up on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno talking about this thing, and I couldn't think of a name for it. So I joked on, and this is on the Jay Leno show. I says, "Yeah, it's called Black Life in Japan," and it just basically went viral, And so everywhere I went, people says, "Oh, where can I get the Black Life in Japan program?" So I had to go back, and I created a program called Black Life in Japan. It's sort of like a reality program on me, and it was, to this day, I still get people who comment that they saw the program back in the day, because through Mike Markwell, it was distributed networks around the world. So, and this was, again, like I said, only about 4 or 5 years in. So when I did that, you couldn't talk to me about like, "Oh, well, you can't do TV programs," because I did it. So yeah, and I just kept doing it.
Well, I think people would just be naturally intrigued by that. I mean, I've seen a few things, like obviously on YouTube, because obviously, Japan is a monoculture, but so is Sweden, and a lot of other places around the world, especially these, like, far places. But I would imagine that it would be a natural fascination.
It was really weird, because I had stars who came to Japan, Hollywood stars, and said, "Hey, you're the Black Life in Japan guy, right?" And I'm like, yeah. And they said they saw it on the internet. They saw them, or they were somewhere traveling, promoting in Europe and somewhere, or Africa, and they say they saw it. So it just, and that kind of taught me the whole, the reality of what media can do. And just how pervasive media can be around the world, because you produce these things and you don't know where they're going to end up, and it's even more so now, with podcasts and things like that. Take you guys. I had somebody from Europe says, "Oh yeah, I'm going to check it out." I check the guys out all the time. I'm like, "Wow, you're in Germany?" You go, "Yeah, I watch it all the time." So it's amazing when you think about that. But then it comes with a responsibility too. So you got to produce something of the quality that that keeps them glued.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's and also too, you just never know what's going to stick.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you don't know, because it's always the least thing that ends up. You spend so much of your time, and I see this happen so much in just different facets of the entertainment business. That you spend so much time in certain avenues, certain directions, and then it's just this one-off that you become known for. It's always amazing. And I think partially maybe it's because it's simple. As artists, we always tend to overthink things, but just the most direct and most obvious, expression ends up being the one that people love.
Yeah.
It's always interesting. So now, first of all, real quick, we'll just go to the board. Mrs. Altman says hello. Lillian Chen says hi, everybody. I think she's been watching the show religiously for the last all the episodes. And I'm going to mispronounce this name. I'm so sorry, but Saquib is loving this episode. So I hope I got your name right. If I did, I apologize. And there we go. So now that you're have been doing this for a while, do you have dream projects? What's in the pipeline? What can you talk about to say
we have several projects. I'm looking to do a project in Okinawa. I was stationed in Okinawa 2 times, and so I have a affinity for there. And then I want to do. I'm a sci-fi fan, right? So I have a script that I'm working on that I'm pretty excited about. It's really weird because a few years back, I think the last time that I interviewed Will Smith, I told him about this idea. He said, "Oh, you got to do it. I'll take a look at it." And I said, "Yeah, right." It was a couple of times, and then I remember he came back, and we said, "Oh, hi, how you doing?" Blah, blah, blah. Hey, you finished that script? I'm like, yeah, I'm working it. And so, and I was always a writer, so it was always easy to do that. But now, like I said, I'm looking. We're looking to do partnering with other companies to create original content out of Japan, and the genres that we prefer is historical, and also futuristic. So I would say those are our goals coming up. Yeah.
Wow. And now I have to imagine the budget for a sci-fi, or is it kind of one of those lo-fi sci-fi specials where you
No. The thing that I'm trying to do, because we're working this on 2 ends. While we're also we're trying to work with the prefectures and tourism and bureaus here in Japan. We're going to Hollywood and said, hey, this is going to take a real budget.
Right.
You got to come over, and it's actually in our best interest right now because the yen versus the dollar is really good. So there's a lot of companies now that are willing to come spend here, and you got to understand there's a big difference between what Hollywood paid for a budget and what Japan pays for a budget. It's not even on the same planet. A big budget movie in Japan would be $7 million, and that's an independent movie in the U.S. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there was a lovely film not lovely, it was a dark film, but it was wonderfully produced called Previously Saved Version. And who was it? Yeah, 2024. You can actually, if you're in the States, you can watch it on Amazon Prime. It's a delightfully sinister but interesting movie. I think it had Carey's in it, and Ito-san, I can't remember, but anyway, but there was where I'm sure they only maybe spent a handful of bucks on it, but man, did that movie look good. I mean, there's something about the Japanese productions where they really seem to pull a lot from that yen, just on these more modest budgets. But yeah, I agree. I think, and I also think too, I like to your point, because we've talked about this on the show previously. They talk about in Japan, they're having a tourism problem. Everyone always goes to Tokyo, Kyoto. I mean, I was guilty of it. You go to the main spots, but if you can start putting entertainment, if there's that killer romantic comedy, it's part of why I wrote Mine Set in Osaka, is to start funneling people around the island. I mean, Hokkaido should have its Well, the one show I know, there's a show, of course, it's the problem with getting older kids is you lose all your nouns. But I think it's called Golden Cami. It's just set in Hokkaido. And I know they've been doing more productions that are set around the island. And hopefully, like you said, if they start to stick, then people will start to want to, see those places.
Japan has a very vibrant movie production scale. But like I said, I can see where it's starting to change, where they're starting to think more international artists. The same for music. For so many years, the music industry here, J-pop, they were just happy with the money we're making in Japan because they're making a lot of money in Japan.
Right.
Yeah.
But when they saw the success now with K-pop and the Philippines and China, these artists, going to international, now they're starting to think like, well, maybe we have to start branching out. So that's a good development. But again,
I
it's
saw
just
Baby Metal the other night. I mean, so I get it.
Baby Metal, right? Yeah, really, really fantastic. So that's the kind of thing that's starting to happen. And I think forums like this, where people talk about it more and it gets out, is really helpful because it just lets people know, like, wow, I wanted to do this, and this is possible.
Right.
Because I tell people all the time, I say, hey, look at me. I mean, I'm probably the most likely person. If you'd have gone back 20-something years when I'm about to retire military, I said, oh yeah, he's going to be producing stuff for Fox and NBC Universal. I would have laughed at that. I would say, yeah, right. So what's possible is what you attempt to do. Anything you attempt to do is possible.
Yeah. No, I remember, and just a fun fact, just show you how things are changing. I had seen Baby Metal in 2019, and then I saw him again just 2 days ago. A friend named Archie, who's a close buddy of mine. He fought cancer, he survived it, but he's a musician and he loves musicianship. And he got into Baby Metal simply because he said their band is incredible. Like it's such a great performance. So when I remember going in 2019, the crowd at the Aragon Ballroom here in Chicago, a lot of older, probably inappropriately aged men were there. It was like, and I know I'm that stereotype, obviously. I'm in my 40s. I'm seeing Baby Metal.
Okay, I was going to say, well, you put that mirror up or something?
Yeah, but I'm there. But it was like all guys like me and a lot of that. In 2025, that was a very different audience. There was it was a lot of kawaii kids, a lot of cosplay kids, a lot of families. There was it was a very, very different vibe. And it was kind of cool to see that all of a sudden you can tell that obviously, middle-aged moms were there, ready to rock out. It was you can start to see how the culture has shifted so quickly. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's because of COVID. I was amazed when I went Netflix, but
and visited one of my grandsons, and he's into cosplay, and stuff like that. So I've been trying to get him to come to Japan. I said, you should come to the place where cosplay was created, But he says it's big,
Right. What's been the biggest changes you've seen covering entertainment and now being involved in it over the last, 20, 25 years you've been in Japan?
Well, I think that the how widespread it is now, because even celebrities now have their own podcasts. They interview each other now. They do this. It's such a great interview. Is such a great forum. It's one of the things when everybody talks about what social media did and what it couldn't do. I think one of the best things social media has done is it allows things like this where people interview and they're fascinated with that. I was transfixed when I went back to visit my relatives in Kansas City. We were at the house one day, and I was just amazed at how much time people spend on the internet just watching stuff, Mm-hmm. and it's amazing because you can any type of content that you're looking for, anything that you like, you can find it, and that's not the networks never did that. It would take them a while, even in America, to develop because I remember when reality shows first came out, and they were saying, "Oh, this is doomed. This format's never going to work," And then you have people like the Kardashians, which is $1 billion franchise, just changed the whole industry there. But in sports and everything else now, you have so many content creators that's creating great stuff. There's a lot of junk out there too, but you can filter that out.
Right. Well, it's also too, I think it's interesting because I think some ways you're getting a tonal change. I mean, it was fun to see Takeshi's Castle remade and showing up on Amazon Prime, but I think it's funny because it's many people in the States who aren't versed in Japanese entertainment. I believe that's just what they think Japanese entertainment is. It's all Takeshi's Castle. And it's not. There's these wonderful programs. And we're starting to see that trickle in now here in the States, where Carey has a wonderful show that's on Netflix that's set in 1970s Japan. And you're getting these more, where they throw a few bucks at the dramas. So it's a little bit more accessible to American audiences. Squid Game opened up a lot of doors, and it's been wonderful to see. And I think it reminds, so I ask you, Daniel, like, what have you've been in this business so long. What else do you want to accomplish? What else besides the big sci-fi movie? What else are you looking to do before your time is done?
I honestly, I want to. I would like to bring more people in the industry. It's entertainment gets maligned a lot. People say, well, they're this or they're going too far this way or they're too woke, but it's still the best form of communication for the majority of people in the world. And I think there's too few people who do it. It kind of gets caught up in certain power cushions or whatever you call it. But once in a while I get to speak at a college class or something like that, and I tell people, I said, hey, go out there and this is the industry I try to recruit people in. I mean, I don't necessarily have jobs to give people, but I said, I'm just one person. Don't, there's so many people who are looking for good people now in this industry, but you got to get out there. You have to do part of the work too.
Right. I'll do it. I'm just saying, putting it out there, I'm ready. Let's go. I mean, it'd be kind of cool to do this in a different time zone.
No, it's just from everything from the local level. I have a cousin who's a preacher, and I watched her one time. I said, you should have a TV show. You should do this. I felt I even wanted to produce it, just couldn't find the time to do it. But I told her, I said, you should go to people in the local community there in St. Louis and pull them together to do this show. And I think that's I look at how I actually got started. Like I said, I was in Yokohama, which is local, compared to Tokyo, right? Mm-hmm. And there wasn't that many, I won't say it wasn't a lot of resistance to me. It was just that they didn't know how to handle me at the time. But people were welcoming. And once I got it up and running, I was surprised at the response that I got from people, especially people on the street who would just walk up and say, hey, I recognize you from this, I recognize you from that. And so I think I like to do more in that area, to kind of spread the word a bit, for whatever time I have left to do this, because I've been fortunate. I've achieved a lot of the things that I wanted to do, and I'm happy. If it ended tomorrow, I'm happy.
Well, hopefully it's not going to end tomorrow, because many people are looking forward to what you're going to do next.
So in terms of like, we always sometimes like to ask this too, we're getting towards the end of the interview. What are there things about Japan, because you've been there obviously a long time, that that maybe through entertainment, what would you want people to know about Japan that maybe isn't common knowledge, top of mind awareness?
Well, you're hearing a lot of talk now where they're talking about, okay, there's too many tourists and stuff like that. But yeah, that's in a couple of places that, it might be oversaturated because nobody knows about the rest of Japan. I would say that there's so many places in Japan that people develop. Japan is safe. It's easy to get around because of mass transportation. Plenty of lodging, and it's amazing to meet the people of Japan. I go to places and whether no one speaks English at all, but people are friendly and outgoing. They invite me into the restaurants and they do stuff. And I, America used to be like that. America used to be exactly like that. And so I tell people, I says, Japan is still like that. And come here and you'll meet people and you'll go back amazed. You will. My family, most of my family, I've been fortunate. A lot of my family members have come to Japan, and they swear by it now. I don't think I can keep them from keep coming. They keep coming now.
It's a lovely experience. I can't wait to go back. And
my kids, because my daughters grew up. Both my daughters grew up in Japan. I was in the military, so Alice and Tia, they grew up in Japan, and so I used to tell people they're more Japanese than I am. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I guess as we wrap up, because I know, like, going back to Deborah's question about interesting stories, like, is there anybody you would love to interview that you haven't interviewed yet? Yeah.
Let me see. There's got to be a couple.
It could be Japanese or American or whoever. I don't care. Just what do you
think that pretty much have gotten in to talk. Okay, there's one, and it's my fault. Morgan Freeman visited, and I was so intimidated by him. I mean, I don't know why, because he seemed to be very friendly, and I wanted to go, and he was coming through. It was for a movie. He was with Clint Eastwood, and for some reason I couldn't go up to him and talk to him. I was just in awe because it was Morgan Freeman, and so I love to get that chance over to interview him. He was
still
just,
working.
He was. It was, but I was one of the few times I was in fear. I was just like, what would I say to Morgan Freeman, And so I think it would be him,
right?
But pretty much everybody else, I've made a point of trying to find him and talk to him. So I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah.
And in terms of, like, Japanese talent, anybody you'd like to talk to again, or anybody you really enjoyed talking to? I know.
Yeah, I love. I'm a big fan of a guy who used to actually work for me, Ryo Suzuki. He's now one of the biggest Japans in Japan now, and so I'm always happy when I get to run into him. But I'm a fan of so many people that I tend to gravitate and find them. You know what I mean? I'm not a stalker or anything, but I tend to have good luck, or if somebody I'll see on TV and I says, wow, I really like to meet them, and then I end up meeting them somewhere, randomly. So I think I'm kind of lucky or gifted in that capacity, that I just tend to, whether it's a Hollywood store, a Japanese store, pop store, music store, is that I love them. But there's one group that I absolutely love in Japan, Perfume. I've never got to meet them, and I've always
they're great. They have a lot of concerts on Amazon.
I'm a groupie fan for them, Perfume. So that's the one group that I have not had a chance to meet that I that's on my bucket list, to hang out with Perfume.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Wow. So,
but also, hey, I'd like to thank you guys for inviting me to come out on the show. I've always been a fan of the show and always watching it, and I will continue to watch it. But it's kind of an amazing experience to be on it, talk about things. So thank you guys. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for being on the show. I mean, I've always said we just have if our show is any good, it's because we just have the best guests. And I know a lot of shows say that, but no, we really do. And we're just really thrilled to have you, and we'll have you back. When you start getting these movies out, let's put us as a part of your press junket.
Put me on the promotion tour, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We had a LinkedIn user saying this was a great interview. Hiroaki said there's a bunch of stuff. I'm sure I'll try to parse what you tell us here, Hiroaki. And then Lillian Chen followed back saying she admires the film directors and producers who have made great contributions and the progress of human civilization. And I know Lillian really well, and she means it. She's a big film person, and so I think what she writes is kind of like what we're all doing here, is to connect and communicate and to bring all of us a little bit closer together and these two fabulous countries closer together. So, Daniel,
Awesome.
thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Next week, we got Jeffrey Rowe from, he's the founder and producer of Miras Pictures, and his mission is to help Japanese stories reach global audiences. So sort of continuing this trend.
Good guy.
Yeah.
Great guy.
We're so happy to have him. And that's it. So thank you all for listening. We'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Yes, we will.
Yes.
Thank you, Ben. Yes, thanks a lot.
Run that intro.